Thank the Force. We are live here, Thursday night, Star Wars News Net Live, and this is going to be, I think, one of the best Star Wars discussions that we've ever had here on this channel, and especially with the three of us. We've only been locked in, the three of us, for about like a month or two now, but I am absolutely ready for these three episodes, because whether or not Andor is your cup of tea or not, like, I think you cannot deny just the quality of the show, what it means for Star Wars moving forward, and just how incredibly well told those three episodes were. So I cannot wait to get into everything that had to do with those and all the parallels we could draw from them. Just want to quickly shout out everyone that's going to be tuning in tonight. Thank you very much. And go ahead and like and subscribe, please, before we get going here. We are on here every Thursday night, 10 o'clock Eastern time. My name is Tyler, joined by Luke, who seems to be hanging out on Yavin this evening, apparently, and Tom, always in the cockpit, ready to engage. But just before we get started, guys, thank you for being here, of course, but I am so ready to talk about these episodes. Quickly, give me your rating for these three. I'm just going to say 10 out of 10 for me. And I had a lot of nitpicky, I had a lot of complaints about these three episodes, but nothing that actually really matters in the grand scheme of things. It was just more of things I would have liked to see told that we didn't get to see told due to the narrative structure of these three and the season as a whole. But 10 out of 10 from me. No, I can't really mark anything down. And I did a rewatch right before we hopped on as well. So, Luke, you just watched them for the first time, just got done. And so I can't wait to see your immediate gut reaction to the Andor episodes.
These were absolute cinema. These were the best episodes of Star Wars we've ever had in their television department.
Oh, wow.
So I couldn't be more impressed. I couldn't be more happy with what I just saw.
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving it a 9.5 because maybe next week's going to be higher. I think just simply tempering myself for next week, the finale of it all. But 7 through 9 this week was it was amazing. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid to say that. Like, I'm so happy with what Star Wars is doing right now.
The best that we've ever gotten in terms of television. I mean, you may be right. It's hard to, objectively, say that. I would, when I watched, I don't know, because there's so many different genres of Star Wars, like television, because there's some Clone Wars arcs that are amazing. There's Rebels arcs that are amazing, Mandalorian, and all these shows feel like very different, tones. I think what we saw this Tuesday was the most important episodes that we've ever gotten in Star Wars, and some of one of the most important just stories in Star Wars history. And I almost say that rather than best, just because, like, for me, like, I think it's great Star Wars, like, seeing Luke in the Mandalorian, or Din taking off his helmet, or certain Clone Wars arcs. To me, I'm like, oh, that's just great Star Wars. But these three just felt beyond Star Wars even, and amplified what Star Wars is as its core in some ways. And that's why I'm like, this is going to be so timeless that it felt elevated and more important than maybe anything I've ever watched for something Star Wars on TV. But Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give it a 10 out of 10 because I feel like I can't imagine getting higher. Maybe 10.5 next week, we'll see. But I can't imagine, and you hit it on the head. It's redefined what Star Wars could be. And it's like the Star Wars that you always knew. How can I say, like, as us as fans, diehard fans, this is how we always saw the potential of what it could be. But Tony Gilroy has elevated into a masterpiece, and timeless is a great word, because I feel like one of the disadvantages of getting 3 episode drops each week is it's a lot to process. It's great that you don't have to wait each week for another episode, but it's a lot to process. And I feel like on the second viewings, you really pick up things that you didn't see. Some of the heartbreaking moments hit harder, even if that's possible. And some of the dialogue, it's just, I told my wife, I'm tired of saying how good the show is because
I'm not tired of hearing you say it, Tom.
it's just because it's like every time you think it can't get any better, it surprises you. So yeah, I haven't been this, I guess, seen a show or Star Wars, I should say, event that just consistently the quality is always there in every facet, not just in the story, but the writing, the music, the production design, the acting, everything is just, the cinematography is gorgeous. So yeah, I mean, I can't praise it enough.
It's remarkable and a miracle in and of itself that this exists in Star Wars. When you think about the current slate of what streaming and media is, and what that looks like, and we need to be mindful of, like Tom, when you said that you're getting tired almost saying how good the show is. I think that it's okay to, like, we're sitting here, we have 1 month of Andor, and we're in the 3rd week of 4. Next week, in 4 days, it's all going to be over. And I'm almost getting a little emotional, like, thinking about that, because
Mhm.
I truly believe that storytelling like this is something that it will exist, like, for forever. Like, as long as we're around, like, stories like this are going to exist, and Star Wars is always going to exist. And when you think about the reach that Star Wars has, the importance that Star Wars has had on culture in so many ways, and then there's something like Andor that, while I don't necessarily believe that all Star Wars should be like Andor, we are so blessed to have Andor and what it means, not just to Star Wars itself, I think, but like culturally, and how relevant the stories that we're hearing are, and how brilliant of a reminder is every time I see some of these clips of, like, George Lucas. Like, is this Lucasian Star Wars? No, because it's not like the same tone that George Lucas would be going for. Like, we've all seen the George Lucas movies, we've watched Clone Wars, but in terms of, like, the message and what Lucas is trying to say in a lot of aspects in regards to imperialism and fascism, and what happens when we lose our way, like, there's a lot of Andor rings true, and still brings out, like, the clarity that we see in the messaging that we see from the original trilogy, and even the prequels as well, for sure, as the lead up to the Empire. So I really excited to get into this. Let's go ahead. Episode 7, we are fully on Yavin at this point, and that was a bit jarring at first because I was expecting maybe a little bit more of a build up to that. It's one of my complaints, is I would have liked to see that happen and see Luthen's kind of descent from the main rebel group happen, but due to the structure of the season, that's something I can kind of build in my head. I'm okay with that. But that's one of the few complaints I have, is like, but it's more of just the nerd in me going, I would love to see all of those things. But we're here on Yavin, and the rebellion's starting to come together, and we're seeing, like, the early stages of that. But Cassian is, still reluctant to do certain things, and Wilming's coming in, and he wants him to go with him to Gorman, and he wants him to take out Dedra. This is for Luthen, but there's clearly, like, this discord between the main rebels, Cassian especially, and Luthen. What did you guys think about just jumping into Yavin, episode 7 as a whole? Were there any standout moments? What do you think about Luthen being a part? Like, there's so much to unpack in this episode that I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle, because episode 8 and 9 are going to be, like, the titular episodes of this entire series, probably. But, 7 is the final build up to those things.
I think Yavin, I will say this. I understand what you're saying. I would have liked to see more of the build-up, but the narrative structure, exactly what you said, I totally agree, made it kind of impossible to do that. But I love every minute. Yavin is, like, my favorite location in all of Star Wars. I think it's Yavin, Coruscant, and Naboo, maybe, or something like that. It's so beautiful the way they do it. I love the mystery of the temples, and I absolutely want to stay in Bix's and Cassian's Airbnb.
This whole time,
treehouse.
I thought they would be, yeah, and they're roughing it in these like barracks, hanging out with each other, and they're literally staying in this, treehouse villa on vacation. It
As
feels
I
like
call it,
on Yavin.
yeah, it's like Swiss Family Cassian or something. But yeah, it reminded me of one of those like Disney like Polynesian resort type look, and I loved I thought that was such a
Join the
great
rebellion.
yeah, such a great like um production design on that. That was really cool. But I love every bit of Yavin I eat up. I love it.
Absolutely. Luke, what did you think?
Oh, I absolutely love Yavin, and I love seeing it here so early on. But I can absolutely echo that I wanted to maybe see that, and for us to have seen in Arc 1, Week 1, that Maya Pei's brigade dies out on Yavin. I thought maybe there could have been a story beat that could have played off of that or a reference back to that. There didn't have to be. The episodes worked fantastic without any of
Right.
that coming back to that. But that's just me. I would have liked to maybe harken back to that in some kind of little way. And I would have maybe liked to see just a little bit more of the setup and how we got there, how we chose that planet, just the nitty gritty stuff that I'm sure will get buried in some kind of Booker comic.
Right. And, I would have loved to see this mapped out in the 5-season show that was maybe originally planned, but I understand. I appreciate what they're doing, what, Tony Gilroy, Diego Luna decided to do with this 2-season format. Let's talk about the Force Healer, because Cassian has this blaster wound that won't heal properly, and Bix wants to take him to see the Force Healer. And to me, this is one of the most pivotal moments in all of Andor, like the entire show for me. Like, this is going to stick with me for a long time, even more so than some of the moments in 8 and 9, because what the Force Healer says to him about how he's a gatherer, and she tells Bix that he's gathering things as he goes. And I just think of all the people he's going to meet in Rogue One, the experiences he had on Narkina with Kino, and how Melshi's joining the rebellion, and they're building him up to what he's going to be. He's a messenger, and how he's the one, him and Jin are the ones that they get the message out about the plans, and bringing the Force into all of this. It really impacted me in a way, because when you think about bringing the Force into Andor, it's a fine line. Like, it's a fine line to thread right there, because it's not necessarily, that's not the point of the show, is getting into the Force and getting into this whole destiny. But we know that he has this fate. And I watched that scene, and it just reinforced to me so much of what's important in Star Wars, which is about destiny, fate, the Force willing certain people to rise up for the galaxy. And I'm like, Cassian's destiny and fate through the Force is just as important as Anakin Skywalker being the chosen one to bring balance, just as important as Luke answering the call to join the rebellion and redeem his father. It's just as important as Leia, being the leader that the rebellion needs, and ultimately like the Senate needs at some point. Just as important as Mon answering the call, Rey answering the call, like Cassian being that person. And the way that every event that happened, from him getting jumped on Marlana back in the day, like, and all of those events leading up to this moment that are going to lead to Rogue One, like his destiny, his call is just as important and sacred in Star Wars as any other character, because of what he ultimately means for the rebellion. I thought this moment just captured that in a very soft way that might get lost in the shuffle for some people. But I just wanted to highlight on just how poignant that was.
Absolutely. I think you kind of nailed it with like the way that like he's called, and he answers that call like many other heroes throughout the entire saga have. You can choose to look at Star Wars through many different perspectives. Andor dives into this like, who is a person who's got boots on the ground perspective of Star Wars. But you can even, this episode 7 even proves that like, if you're someone who's really into the Jedi and the Force, and that's your main thing,
right,
you still have a perspective into this story. Like the Force works through people, whether they're Jedi or not, whether they're Force sensitive or not. The Force is using Cassian Andor to bring balance back to the Force. And I think that is something that people, I don't want to hear complaints about I need more Jedi or lightsabers. Like
Right.
we know that the Force is at work here and is working to balance things out. So I like that's still in there. There's a hint of that.
Exactly. What I really liked about it is I at first I had a little bit, I thought that maybe they were going to be hinting that Cassian might be Force sensitive, and I was like, oh, I hope they don't go that route because it kind of echoes a lot of I guess sometimes fans would talk about like how that's feeling it's, no pun intended, forced, in certain other films and TV shows. But if the Force is really, as Obi-Wan described it, surrounds us and binds, it so many people, like, they can be a vessel for it or touched by it or use it in a way not so much like you said, throwing things around the room, but
lifting rocks.
Right, lifting rocks, but use it almost like connect in a way, or like you said, getting back to that whole purpose, the will of the Force and things like that. So I found that very profound. I when the scene was starting and I kind of saw what they were going to do, I was like, not nervous, but I says, oh, I wonder how they're going to play this off. But I felt like they did it so well.
We've talked about Cassian answering the call, but even how reluctant he is to answer that call throughout the entire show, even up to the end of this arc, he says he's done. But he always jumps right back in. But at a certain point, he's done, and then Bix almost has to answer that call for him, and we'll get into that. And it just reminds me too of Luke when Obi-Wan first calls out to Luke and says, "You need to come with me to Alderaan," and Luke says no, like I gotta stay here and I gotta chill. And it's not until Owen and Beru are killed by the Empire that he's almost forced to, out of anger a little bit and frustration, but he has nothing left to keep him from doing that. And Cassian's gonna end up in the same way. And that's similar to when Marva dies in season 1 and what he's seen on Narkina, and then what he heard his mother say, and how he felt like, now I have to give it for the cause. And so it's just a call that he continues to answer throughout his entire story. And he's picking up these pieces along the way. We see him pick up K2 in the next episode. And there's just something so beautiful about that in Star Wars when we get these characters that are able to answer that call despite everything telling them maybe not to sometimes. And my favorite one of all, this isn't even Andor, it's like when Han is flying away and then Han comes back and does this. I saw someone say that this is the greatest trilogy of all time now. Andor, Rogue One, into A New Hope, like greatest trilogy of all time. And then there might be some reasons to say yes to that being true. But what do you guys think about Bix's role here in this episode? Because Cassian doesn't want the Force healer. He's trying to push away this idea that he's a messenger, he's called, and because Bix is like, I know there's something really special about you, and he's trying to maybe push back on that, but she really has this very firm belief.
I feel like she, as talking about being a vessel for the Force or being used by the Force, she talked about how she saw that in her dreams. That's a very Star Wars thing to have. So I think what you said is great, because the hero has to answer the call and then maybe they'll turn it down. But what I love about this show is that there's so many people that inspire him to say yes to the call, whether it be Bix or Luthen, Brasso, his mom. Yeah. And, I think I love that speech from Brasso in the first season where he said he's reading, I guess, or he's telling him what Marva told him, that he's going to be an unstoppable force for good. It's really powerful. And you see it again and again. And in some ways, and we'll probably get into episode 9 and with Bix and everything, but how can I say, not that she makes the decision for him, but she just makes it clear that he has to do this.
That she says, she shows him for us.
Right. But she shows him that's really his only choice. So
What do you think about the fact that Luthen is not even a part of Yavin? Like, it doesn't really show how it falls out, but you could kind of put the pieces together of how that would come across. And Luthen gets results, Wilman says, and you could see that definitely how he would have some tension with the way things are run on Yavin.
It's interesting because you never question this in the original trilogy because you just have what you have. But in Rebels, you saw the way that Saw was so opposed to the way that Mon Mothma led the rebellion, and now Luthen is on the other side of that. It appears so. I would like to know more about that. I don't know what will be revealed, but I guess you could surmise that his job is, and you kind of saw this, and he feels like his job is done. Not that I feel like when he was talking in episode 9 to Cassian and Clea was there, it wasn't so much I have to stay here to hold down the fort. It was basically like he was kind of admitting that he's not really he knew what his job was. Not to throw a religious reference in, but almost like John the Baptist, like he knew he was preparing the way, kind of, but he knew when it was his time or his work was done.
Yeah.
Just step back a little bit. Luke, where are you at with Luthen?
He's one of those people that's a pusher for Andor. Because I think, harkening back like a few minutes ago, Cassian is someone who like gets pushed along by others. He's not exactly the most decisive or go-getter type of person, but like situations push him toward the future, and so and people do inspire him to go forward. Luthen is one of those people who gave him a future: kill me or join me, kill me or let me join up. Like end of season 1. So I saw him being comfortable on Yavin as a way to kind of like distance himself from Luthen. He knows that Luthen's not going to come there, not going to be there. And we know in this arc, he's tired of working for Luthen. He doesn't want to do that anymore.
Right.
So I saw his home on Luthen, his home on Yavin, is completely trying to cut ties with Luthen. And it makes sense. I think, again, I wish I could have like seen a little bit more behind the scenes, but it makes a lot of sense that Yavin is where people are really gathering to make a united front against the Empire and a united front out in the open. And this is like a double header of like what Luthen does not do. He does not really unite with other people to share power. He does not want to do things out in the open. So, I mean, it makes tons of sense that he's not really encouraged to join up and come to the round table and stuff. So
he's been so burdened by secrecy and almost to the point where, if you're living in secrecy, it becomes almost impossible to trust anyone. And there's only a handful of people that he probably feels like he can trust. And so the idea of being out in the open on Yavin, where he is vulnerable, but also everything he set up would be vulnerable because of that, is probably too much for him to take. On Gorman, I want to talk for a moment about, because then we'll get into the big episodes here, 8 and 9. I forget the name of one of the members of the Gorman Front, who they're all talking about, should we fight? Should we continue to peacefully protest? And then there's the one guy, he's the one that got into the scrum with Sam in the last arc that led to Cinta dying. And he's the one that basically says, stop. Like, it doesn't matter what we do, whether we fight, whether we peacefully protest, we are the Gore, he says, what matters is that we do this together. We can't let them break us apart. So that's what they want to do. I thought this was a really powerful moment. And this is a character who has an equally powerful moment in episode 8 when he starts singing like the Gorman, anthem. And this random character, like I said, can't even remember his name right now, but just little things like that are going to get lost in the shuffle because of these 3-episode arcs, but shouldn't be forgotten necessarily.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, the great thing is we have this now with us forever. So you know, I feel I want to go back and watch every episode from
Mhm.
season 1 and season 2 and then Rogue One, because there's so much there, and I feel like it's timeless, like we said before.
Mhm.
I
And
think my
we've
favorite
had
thing
these.
about him, he's the one that's in the control room, right, where they're bickering, and I like that speech where like, listen, what they're doing to us already. We
Mhm.
are the group that is supposed to be the resistance, and we can't even agree.
Mhm.
Like the way that they're very lightly, like the Maya Pei Brigade, they can't agree, and they're supposed to be this united front, but like
Mhm.
they fall apart and
Right.
they die out. They don't make it.
Mhm.
This group is on the verge of having a similar kind of schism. Nobody gets along here in this moment, but he's able to break through and say, listen, we can't agree on this,
Mhm.
but what we can't agree on is something bigger, what we're really a part of. We're arguing on how to do something. We all
Mhm.
agree on what to do.
Right.
Let's get
And
together
that
and do this. I love that type of character, that the
Mhm.
archetype.
And then that brings us into episode 8, which is when we see everything laid out on the table. It all culminates to this moment. And, we think about the Gorham Massacre and what that meant in Legends for a long time. And then what it means here, which is essentially turns out to be like the entire genocide of an entire group of people on this planet, essentially. And just like when Mon says that in episode 9, like it shouldn't be taken lightly, like throwing that word out there and being upfront about it and what we witnessed. And what really struck me in this was just every single thing, from the way the Imperials were killing their own people to make it seem like the rebels were causing this, to the way that the media has portrayed this and truth has essentially evaporated, to Captain Kaido being this specialist that they bring in because this is what they have been doing on countless other worlds at this point, because they said he's a specialist, like this is what he's really good at, he's going to be able to make this happen. It's like, oh, you have systematically been doing this across the galaxy, because we saw how they weaponized propaganda in the very first episode when they were talking about what they were going to do, and how it's culminated in Partagaz just saying, "Bad luck, Gorman. We've our issues with them have been very clear, and their unwillingness to adapt to imperial norms, being unable to slide in with the rest of society." And there's a moment when one of the reporters, when Cyril like is walking in, he's the reporter is saying like, this crazy insurrection, volatile insurrection behind me, that leads to a reporter at the end of the episode saying, who knows what we will have to sacrifice to keep our safety intact after something like this. And it just reminded me just of what the messaging of Star Wars has been from the very beginning. What can happen when we lose sight of the truth and we lose sight of what's really happening. And and it literally says in episode 3, this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause, this populism that can rise up in front of us and take the place of truth.
Yeah, and it's like when you think about it, I'm trying to think in the other movies when the Empire, maybe in The Empire Strikes Back, has been this efficient in carrying out their plan and just chilling. I mean, have TIE fighters and stormtroopers ever been scarier?
Mm-hmm.
Even when they're moving in the plaza, it's like I felt like even the sound effects of them marching was like, it was powerful, and it was scary, and it was
Felt
um
suffocated.
yes,
You
yes.
felt it.
And then those KX droids get unleashed, and that
Mm-hmm.
was insane.
Mm-hmm.
So
But like, we should talk about the fact that they sniped their own person to incite this rebellion. These things happen, and
and they
this
threw out
was
those I guess inexperienced troopers that they brought in
Mhm.
to just kind of be like sacrificial lambs to start
Right.
this. And Enza's father is the one that realizes what's going on, and no one will listen.
He knows it. It's so tragic to watch him be right the entire time. Of they're bringing us in, and there's nothing that he can do to stop it. But it's just the call of what what it means when we lose sight of, what's real. And there's an episode, the next episode when or no, the episode 7, where the senator from Gorman says they can't even make the lies good anymore. But people are just buying into this, and where the Gormans are seen as enemies for a lot of people across the galaxy. And I don't know, there are so many just parallels. And this was for anyone that says, like, let's keep politics out of Star Wars, or let's not get too political here, or the woke garbage, but like, take that and throw that shit away, because that's what Star Wars is. It's what it's always been. And this is as upfront, in your face as it's ever going to get in Andor. But that's in no way something that I think there's people that will use that to Star Wars' detriment. But if anything, this is what Star Wars has always been.
I was talking to my fiance about that after we watched the episodes, and I was just trying to, like, tell her, I'm like hedging my bets here. I'm thinking, like, there's already going to be discourse that I haven't seen yet about, oh, like, does that deserve to be in Star Wars? That was a bit too much. But I said 1977, the citizens of Alderaan, I think, probably experienced something similar to an atomic bomb, and that's something that's real, that's been dropped on Earth before. I think that the Gorman massacre has also happened, here on Earth before, actually, too. Like, there's just, it's baked in. This is what Star Wars is. This was tough to watch, but there's tough things that go on in the world that you should probably think about. It's just a good vehicle for that.
And there's an interesting discussion to be had about, it feels like maybe almost too close to home. Like, this is almost too real, instead of, being in a galaxy far, far away. I felt like the line was towed very, very well, because there is the level of, like, this is taking place in Star Wars. And I never lose sight of that when I'm watching. But it's important to, like, this is what, like, media, this is what, like, art is supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to be able to, draw something from us that we can, see in front of us on a daily basis as well. And, like, even when the Jedi are, Luke is confronting his father, it's Return of the Jedi. He's far, far away, and there's laser swords and the Force, and he's throwing objects. You have Force lightning coming out of Palpatine. But the entire core of that story, of what makes it so compelling to people, is it's just a son trying to reach his father. And how poignant, how realistic is that for almost, everyone at some point that's reached for a father figure, or needed someone to come through and support them, or hasn't given up on someone in their life and they've wanted to. But, it has the mask almost of not necessarily being too close to home, because it, is in Star Wars. So like, obviously this is a little bit more grounded in realism than something like that. But at the same time, there's, KX droids walking around just meleeing people. And so it can still be, a little bit far away there. But what did you guys think of Cyril and Dedra's interaction when Cyril finally realizes that everything is that he has believed is a lie, and when he confronts Inza's father, and Inza's father basically says, like, you're a fool if you believe this. And he is a fool, because he has been buying all of these things to this really very, like you mentioned earlier before we started, like, awkward, like, this intense, like, weird encounter that he has with Dedra as he realizes all of this.
It was so, I think we mentioned this before the show. It was so uncomfortable to watch that scene, because, I mean, she's terrible. Her character's doing terrible things. His character's done terrible things. They're awful people, but for some reason, you want them, I don't know, you want them to come to their senses, but still be okay, and then get redeemed somehow, and it's not going to happen. But the emotions I felt throughout that scene were so scattered all over the place, but it was so uncomfortable. And when he was basically assaulting her, it was very uncomfortable to watch, but very powerful with how they did it, and how she tries to justify it. it was such a powerful scene. His whole arc through this episode, not to mention the show, has been really amazing. But you know, to the point where, you know, we'll get to it. Even his last moment, when Cassian says the worst thing to a person like Cyril to hear, "Who are you?" You know, that you're not important. You know, I don't even know. You know, I guess from like Endgame, when Thanos is like, "I don't even know who you are."
You
It's
took
like,
everything from me. I don't even
yes,
know
yes.
who you are.
It's basically that same beat.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful and tragic. And yeah, I mean, just it was everything that, to, I guess, finish his character that you wanted.
You mentioned that Bix is, you know, trying to like justify it. And I feel like, yes, but I think she's almost wanting Cyril to justify it for her, because you could feel how she's going to go through with this, but she is trembling throughout and knows this is wrong, but she's going to follow orders. She's an evil person. And she just wants, there's one person in her entire life that she actually, I guess, loves and trusts unconditionally, and that's Cyril. And so she's like, if this one person that, yes, I've lied and manipulated along the way, but if he will join me in a sense and help me justify it, like if he speaks back to me what I want and need to hear right now, then it's gonna make everything okay. But the fact that he was he was done and he left, and it was, you know, but too little too late for Cyril. But I thought that was interesting. She's like almost pleading with him without saying the words, like, I'm begging you, but she's almost seemed like with her eyes, her facial expression was like pleading with him to justify this with me. Say that, you know, we're going to go back. We're going to be together. We're going to be heroes. This is fine.
Yeah.
And she doesn't get that. And ultimately she loses everything too, thankfully, because she sucks.
Those moments are so heartbreaking in Star Wars. And we talked about this, I think, in another episode, where it's Luke to Vader, come away with me. Padme to Anakin, let's and now with Dedra and Cyril, where she's like, we're gonna be going home as heroes, we're gonna have our reward, and you just see it all falling apart. It's so like heartbreaking is a tough word, because they're terrible people, but it was just, there's a part of you in there that is, you feel how tragic their story is.
Especially like for Cyril, but Luke, jump in.
I was going to say, yeah. Just commenting on, like, I was hoping, I know it wasn't going to happen, but I was hoping Cyril could win her over. I've watched Return of the Jedi. I know that nobody's ever too far gone.
Right.
The second most evil person ever. Like, Darth Vader still does a good act and can ripple out some really good things from his life. Like, I was hoping Dedra could maybe walk away from that, but geez, it's insane that, like, she has risen so far up into the ranks of the Empire. She's on this top secret mission that there's not a lot of clearance above her, and yet the person propping her up is the lowliest person that she's ever met. Really, it's Cyril, who she confides in eventually with everything, but she is completely destroyed by him being inside that massacre. Not by the fact that the massacre is happening. It's the fact that he's there.
And he's been defined by this rule of law, right and wrong. And like RG says here, he's thought he's been doing the right thing up from the first moment we see him trying to catch Cassian Andor. He believes in the Empire. He believes in justice and what's right and what's wrong. And it's not until this moment he realizes that everything he believed was a lie, and that on the surface level, that's what the Empire is supposed to be. It's supposed to be, you know, rule of law, order, justice, you know, a firm hand towards the right side, but it's all a mirage. It's all a facade for what lies underneath, which is we are going to take until, and it does not matter who gets in our way. We are going to take everything from you, no matter the cost. And that cost, that, you know, almost always is human life and the people that we like, the Gormans that we see here. Cassian for many people, I think the best moment of this episode might have been when he has his final like interaction with the former bellhop of his, who wishes him, he hopes for the best for him, and he gives him the line, rebellions are built on hope, which is the line from Rogue One that you might say, like, that's the one that gives me the most chills when Jin says that in front of the whole council of the rebellion. And for him to get that in this moment from a character that he may not even remember his name and has interacted with a handful of times, that's going to stick with him. This like small moment before what he witnesses afterwards, that's going to stick with him for that long, to where he imparts that to Jin.
Another thing pointing him toward being a collector. All these small things, from Nemec to this bellhop, like Force Healer was right. You're right. He's collecting these things as he goes.
Right. Just try, even like this. You think about Nemec and how one thing will break the siege, and then his sacrifice of taking out those troops, and he dies and all of that. But I thought that there's a fine line to thread. There's not, when you do it can be a little cheesy sometimes if you throw in the lines of like, oh, that's the line. I thought they did a great job here. Like, I think it felt natural. It felt right for Cassian to pick that up from just a little person who I think embodies, like what Luke said, that person embodies what Nemec's manifesto is all about. Like, just the small acts of insurgency that move the rebellion lines forward. I think like that little person one person just doing that small thing of helping Cassian that one time, or to build up to sacrificing his life in a way. That one line that he gives Cassian propels him to move one day forward.
Gosh, that thermal detonator that he throws. I was like, is there an open window that he's going to like do some damage to? Nope. That was it. That was his contribution to the rebellion as a bellhop. Like, he never got to see Yavin. He never got to see Luke Skywalker. But like, for him to participate in the galactic struggle in a small way, that's what Nemec's manifesto was all about. Oppression is the mask of fear. Eventually, there will be one too many things, and it'll flood the banks of the Empire. Like, that's one more drop that will flood the bank. And goodness, that made me tear up watching that go.
Every time I hear the Gorman like national anthem, when they start singing it and they join arms, and that's one that stuck with me. Just the power of the people being together in that moment, but how that moment is going to be painted so evilly by the Empire, and it's going to be twisted in such a way that people are going to look on that so differently. And I don't know, it was something about watching them, join and sing together and knowing the impending doom. There's something about music that captures, the heart in a way that nothing else really does. And to see that played out there, it felt very natural. Like, that's something that I feel like could happen at any point in time. And whenever tragedy has happened or is about to happen, like, joining in song is like one of the first things that people do together. Like, at funerals, often people will sing, or I think of like after 9/11, like there's like videos, of like people gathering on the streets just singing, Amazing Grace together, like little like things like that are like naturally happen. And for that to happen here in this episode, I thought was extremely powerful.
Brings them together.
What did you think?
It feels like too with that anthem, it feels like it's existed for ages. It didn't seem like
thousands of years.
They just wrote it for the show. It just seemed so natural and so like, just so powerful.
It felt, it was one of those where you felt like they are believing what they're singing. It's not that they're not just singing the words. It's when when someone feels like what they're singing inside, like it comes out in ways that it's really indescribable. It was one of those moments, like, and you saw Dedra witnessing that.
It's like watching the World Cup, and you're watching the like they're singing their national anthem before like they're gonna go represent their entire people, and it was that feeling of like they're proud
Right.
to be singing
Mhm.
this. This thing captures them, and that means everything for them.
And Cassian's tears at the end were just a
Oh,
great little moment
yeah.
at the very end. And so that kind of propels us into episode 9, which it is hard to match what episode 8 brought, and episode 9 clearly does it.
We have another person on
And
the channel now.
My
we love
love
when
cat.
Maple makes an appearance. Of course, always love it when Maple makes an appearance. I just want to jump. I don't want to skip over any of the important things, but we're already 46 minutes in, and we're just now on episode 9. And there's a lot of things that happen before Mon Mothma's speech. There's a lot that happens before then. But I almost just want to lead with it and talk about what she said. And was there like a part of it that stood out to you, whether it be just something that she said specifically, or, the way it was portrayed on screen? Like there was times where Cassian, was just sitting in thought, or even Cloris was sitting and listening in the car to Genevieve O'Reilly just delivering a masterful performance in that episode. Was there anything particularly that you felt like drawn to more so than other parts of the speech or other parts of the episode?
I think I really liked the buildup of how we got the floor to be opened up to Mon Mothma, that there was one senator who was willing to pass her allotted time off and chose Bail. Bail then had it planned to relay that, according to A17252, over to the senator from Chandrila. I just liked that even that act is a little bit of a rebellion. Like,
Right.
that wasn't supposed to be like the intended effect of that bill or like that rule, but like they thwarted the Empire's rules by the Empire's intent to oppress by using their rules. You have to, you're condemned to use the tools of your enemy to defeat them. That's what Luthen says. And that's what Mon Mothma is kind of doing here, is kind of that embodied.
That's such a good point.
So just getting her to the floor, I thought, was a creative way to do that. Again, the Bail actor, I don't remember his name, but I thought he did a great job as Bail Organa. But her speech was awesome. I don't know how closely you guys have people in your lives personally that have maybe like fallen down some kind of alt-right pipeline where they believe crazy conspiracy theories. I've got people in my own life I talk to that are good people, but they believe some outlandish things. And it really hit home for me to watch Mon Mothma, this fictional character, hit a real world truth of like, when truth goes out the window, that's evil's greatest victory. That shook me to my core, because I have felt that for a couple of years, and to see that preached, I was like, absolutely, that is really hard to deal with loved ones who just cannot agree with you at all.
Right. It's, I had a feeling this show would hit really hard at this time in our history, and it definitely is. And yeah, that whole thing about truth, it'll go to the monster, or the monster who screams the loudest. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah,
it was just so powerful. Just that whole buildup, and I love. And this is a little moment around that, because look, we know she's given the speech. We didn't know what she was going to say, but we kind of know the gist, right? We know that she's going to get out of there because she survives. We know Cassian's going to survive, but how? Why did it keep us on the edge of our seats? But the only thing I can attest is just the great way it was crafted. And I love the little throwaway part when they couldn't turn off, that guy couldn't turn off the feed. And they're like, well, we're supposed to lock it. That's the protocol. And they said, well, where's the key? It's upstairs. So he's like, and it reminds me, like, working in tech, like things I've been like crazy about trying to fix, and just that the way he did that was so funny. But I love the subtle look that the two women, I guess, look at each other like, and it's so subtle that you know, they obviously Luthen had something to do with that, or someone had something to do with that being there at the right time, and it was just so subtle, but just such a great moment when they couldn't stop it. So
we live in a day and age where someone will believe anything on a whim, like just and truly believe it because that's and this is like the line. This just drives me in crazy sometimes, like because that's just their truth. That's what they want to believe. It's what this fits my narrative, and so I'm going to craft this to fit my narrative, despite what is actually happening. I'm going to see this headline, and I'm going to run and just not really read anything, but I'm going to see a headline. I'm just going to believe that it's true. And we live this day and age where people will, there's going to be hundreds of people posting videos this week on, negative like videos on the messaging that was in Andor and how horrible it is, strictly based off of how can I create vitriol around something for my benefit. And there are so many leaders in the world today. There are so many people that profit off of the disinformation, of the anger and the hate. The monster that screams the loudest is usually the one who wins, as Mon says. And so, like Luke, you mentioned before, her line of the death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil. When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to that appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. And that line, that scene where it cuts to her and Genevieve O'Reilly was able to just she just controls the entire moment, and you feel it, like the gravity of what's happening. And even though we know she survives, and even though we know that she goes on to be Chancellor of the New Republic, and that we're all going to be okay because the Republic's going to be restored, and she's a big part of that, never once did I feel like she was 100% going to make it out. Like there's part of I'm on the edge of my seat, and it made me just yearn for people in the world today to stand up and say like what something like that, and to take a stand for truth, because I think we have too many cowards out there that are unafraid, that like Dedra, who's ultimately like a coward because she's unable to turn away from the ISB. She knows what she's doing is wrong, but she's too evil. She's a coward to do so. And here we have Mothma ready to give everything for the cause. And I think what's most important to highlight too is how unpopular what she's saying is to the people in the room. She's getting booed. She's getting jeered. She's being called a traitor. They locked down the entire building just to kill her. And it reminds me, in Florida, there's a lot of legislation out there to try and hinder truth in schools, or to restrict, I guess, what students are able to learn, or control what they are learning. And there are people that are trying to combat that, but it reminds me of some of the loopholes that we'll take as educators to work around that, and have like those conversations, and thinking of all of the people in the world today and in history that have been on the side of the Gormans, and that who are the Gormans of our society today, and how unpopular it is to maybe the populist movement to support those people at those times. Like it rings true in her speech and in what Mothma's saying, and I feel like we see that on different levels wherever we are in our life. Some people live that every single day, like they are the Gorman Front. Some of us are the people on Coruscant, like just watching on TV, and are getting desensitized to things sometimes. And it's important I think, to watch shows like Andor, and to be able to pull some of like that realism into our lives today. Like, where do I fit like on this quote unquote like galactic scale, and making sure that you're on the right side of that, even like if it's not, easy, so to speak. Sorry.
That's why I think the show will really age well, because I feel like if there's one thing you can say, it's true. It doesn't hold back. It doesn't, it, as uncomfortable as it can seem at times, it just tells the truth. It continues to do that. And I feel like that's why for following Star Wars for so long, obviously there are other media in Star Wars that I love, but they just don't go that deep. And this is showing you the ugliness of the Empire and the Rebellion. And I guess not so much ugliness might be a strong word. It just lays it bare, basically, what it is. And that's why, again, I think that's why it just really, I have powerful like emotions when you watch it, because, well, not only is it great filmmaking, it's just the message behind it. The messaging is so powerful, and it makes you think about it. There's a lot of things there that, I guess you watch it and you're like, oh, maybe I am a citizen of Coruscant, and maybe I've been listening to the wrong voices, or I've been believing a narrative that isn't true, or I've been manipulated, so I think if you could do that, that's why I think maybe you get the reactions that you see with some people very like opposed to it, because it kind of, it reveals some uncomfortable truths.
And I think of how many people are like Cloris, and like you said, the Republic being laid bare. It felt like Cloris was having a moment of clarity, and this is how I interpreted. Like maybe he was having this moment of clarity. Like Mon's speech really got to him, and he left the car to go to see what was going on, to look for her. And in that moment, I felt like he would have helped her escape no matter what. Like I truly felt like he was like on the verge of that happening. I think he was really moved, but we see like the rebellion laid bare. Cassian can't take a chance at all, and Cloris had picked a side and stayed on that side too long, to the point where, if they had brought him in, Cloris, we need to get it. Maybe he does help, but when he just takes him out, and just seeing what the rebellion feels like they have to do to push their lines forward, like you said, it's brutal in its own way as well. And that, I think Cloris is another one of those. He's just like a casualty of war, and just an expendable person that the Empire threw out there, knowing they could get in harm's way, but they don't care.
Yeah. And I think the Empire does it a lot more, but we've also seen it on the Rebellion side with Anto Krieger, just being one of those
That's a good point.
chess pieces that has to be played to keep the game going, to eventually win the long game. But sometimes these pieces need to be sacrificed for a greater play.
Yeah, sacrificing Krieger for Jung to be able to stay in
30 men
in the ISB.
loves Krieger.
That's a really good point, Luke, about like the sacrifices that the rebellion makes to keep pushing. Luthen especially being someone who stirs that, and Luthen having these connections where, he has his ISB plant who lets him know that there's someone in Bail Organa's team that he has put there because he has to where he gets it to Erskine, who gets it to like we get it to Mon, like Erskine gets it to, it just keeps going down the chain to where Cassian's able to break her out. And then he gets home to Bix and tells Bix he's done and he's ready to move on. And I love this line where he says, "There's nothing more important than this," talking about his relationship with Bix, and how, in some sense of what's happening, how true that is. Like there is, maybe nothing more important than the person that you love and what you're doing right there. And Bix, though, makes that choice of leaving for the rebellion. And we mentioned this. And Cassian was ready to leave it all. And how he said he feels like he's overplayed his hand already. He's lucky. And we know that that's true because of what's going to happen in Rogue One. And it made me think of when Jin was talking about, we're just going to take the next chance and the next one and the next one until, the luck runs out. And
right.
And it just felt perfectly synchronized with what we're going to see in Rogue One.
You know what that reminded me of? It reminded me of A New Hope when Obi-Wan's like, in my estimation, there's no such thing as luck. When Han says, calling the Force luck,
Right.
or I'm bad. I should know all those lines down. But the way he says there's no such thing as luck, and it made me think of Cassian just thought he was lucky, but there were greater forces at work in his narrative. He had a purpose.
It felt like a way to kind of just to further that narrative that like we have to get out. Like that's the nature of things. But like sure he is lucky, yes, but he's very trained. He's very smart. I mean, he's picked pointedly to go to Aldhani. Like, sure, there's luck, but like he's kind of downplaying himself just to get himself out of that situation. And I mean, we understand that. Like, he's in love. He wants to get out, but the way that he'll even just be a detriment to himself to get out of this rebellion when the rebellion needs him, the cause needs him, and Bix knows that. I don't know. I don't know. I was gonna say, but like I don't know if I've ever seen a bigger sacrifice than Bix leaving the person she's in love with, who saved her from that second arc where she is losing her mind, taking drugs. He's the rock and saves her, and she does this to keep him in the fight and to save the rebellion. Save the rebellion. Save the dream.
She makes that sacrifice. You could argue like she's one of the bravest of them all, because if anyone deserves that happy ending and to have some happiness in their life, it's Bix. I mean, she lost her home. Pretty much everyone but Cassian that she's ever loved or been close to is gone. And she's been through the worst torture imaginable in the galaxy under Dr. Gorst and come out of it on the other side. And she has this moment where the person she loves is saying, let's just go, and it's just you and me, and we can have this. And for her to say, no, I choose the rebellion, and I know that you have this purpose. Like it's one of the, like you said, Luke, it's one of the greatest sacrifices in Star Wars. It's to me, Bix is the ultimate character for it. And this is, I think we've talked so many times leading up to the show, how is Bix going to die, or will Bix die? And I would assume that she lives through this because of all of this. Luke said she's going to live, but in a way, she is dead in a sense to the story, because she's gone. Like, it is not like a death in the sense of she's actually in the ground, but she is gone. And it's more powerful, I think, than anything else in the whole, when this is all over, when we've won, I will find you. And we all know that Cassian dies there on Scarif. And I just instantly thought of the scene of him looking to the horizon, knowing he's about to meet his death. And he's 100% thinking of Bix in that moment. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. He's thinking of Bix in that moment, and how they aren't going to be able to do those things, and she's not going to be able to find him. And it breaks your heart knowing that that's going to happen. But there is that sense of hope, because that Bix was right. He was needed, or else the rebellion would not have survived.
Goodness. I just I think about, I'm putting like the cart before the horse, but I'm thinking about even just a mini series of some type of media where it's Bix finding out, or having to like work to find out that he didn't make it. And what does she do from that? Is she more spurred on to help the New Republic gain its feet, or is she burned by that and wants out of any kind of rebellion or any kind of government at all? I wonder what she would respond to that. Yeah.
Do you guys think we'll see Bix in the last arc? Do you think we will see her? We talked before. I could easily see her not appearing again, and she's just gone. I think that there's two sides of that, where if she doesn't appear again, there is like the mystery and the beauty. It reminds me of like the Dark Knight Rises, when the end of the movie,
Mhm.
you have like Bruce Wayne and he's sitting there with what's her face, Catwoman, and I'm blanking on the name, but and he makes eye contact with Alfred, and it's like, some people, I've seen there's a lot of good theories like online of, was that Alfred imagining that in a sense? Do we actually, know that he saw him there? Or some people saying he did make it out and he is living that peaceful life that he's wanted. And I almost think if Bix doesn't show up, we could have a similar situation where, like, we don't know, did she find out that he was a part of Rogue One? Did she not? Like, how did she respond? And you can kind of craft your own narrative and your own story. And there's a beauty in that, and letting the audience decide, what her story ends up being, and how she ends up finding out or doesn't. But if they do some like scene at the very end where she's at like a memorial for the Rogue One team on whatever the planet that they call home is for the New Republic. I could totally see that being
We're putting a brick
incredibly,
in Ferrex
yeah,
for Brasso, for Cassian. That would be really
Yeah, and
moving.
a trio with Marvas.
hmm I could think there's a lot of that where they could easily create something like that. So I'm curious to see what happens. What do you, if you guys
Yeah,
have to make a
I don't want to
prediction?
get my hopes up, but like I'd love to see some kind of closure. And now I always thought the ending would be going to what is it, the Rings of Kafrene?
Ring of
Uh,
Kafrene.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
That's
figured
kind
that
of
would
what
be
they
the
said.
ending, and it would lead right in. But I would love like an epilogue, or some kind of closure like that with the story. Even though I feel like it was beautifully done, there was something about that sequence with Bix that reminded me of the show Lost for some reason. I don't know, maybe because they were in the jungle, but just the way it was cut, I thought it was just so well when he's reading the message. Then you see him running, trying to see if he can get her before she leaves. That was so powerful.
I think if I had to put, money on it or something, I think that's the last we'll see ever. I don't think we'll see her in the last arc. I think it was super powerful, super moving for that to be how she goes out and how she's not in Rogue One, how she's not in the original trilogy. I thought it was a good send off for the character. So I'm not expecting to see her. I have no problem if she shows up in the last arc, but I think I like said my goodbye to Bix at the end of episode 9. I think that's where I sit with it.
Like, there's so many ways they could go. I could see the memorial route.
Totally.
I could see them, her finding out shortly after maybe the Battle of Yavin, or like a year later. I don't know. Something happens where she gets word of Rogue One and Cassian Andor, and she joins the rebellion. Like she re-enters the fight in a different way, where we find out picks up the blaster, she joins the rebellion. Maybe in our head can, like, that means she's on Endor, she's part of that battle, she goes to Jakku. Like, there's so many ways that they could craft her story. Like, she's like, Cassian's gone now, I'm going to continue the fight for him, that even though he's gone. Like, there's a number of ways that could happen, and I would love to see somehow even branched off from her, like an epilogue, so to speak. How does the Rogue One group inspire other like sects of the rebellion? Because the rebellion isn't going to, just like they kept Cassian bringing saving Mon Mothma. They took that off the logs. Like, this was a Yavin effort. We brought her in with Gold Squadron. They're not going to do that with Rogue One. Like, they're going to be martyrs that will inspire like, they're going to use that to inspire other people to join the rebellion. Like, that story is going to get pushed out one way or another. And so these are going to be like, go down as like heroes. I think like Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, like, these are going to be people that are heroes of the rebellion, that I think are going to be commonplace names among those who are either in the rebellion or following, the war on a certain scale. And there's going to be like some sort of memorial set up to where like everyone's going to know, these names, just like they know Leia Organa, Luke Skywalker, there will be plenty of people that know like the story of Captain Cassian Andor, and Jyn Erso, who got the plans and sent them to the rebellion. So an epilogue, I never really thought that would be where this story would go, but the way that this arc ended, it feels like maybe, and like it feels right, but at the same time, they've said throughout the entire thing, the last shot is going to be Cassian and K2 and them going to go get Jyn. So I totally understand if they just end it there and we have to imagine it all. But my goodness, it would be satisfying.
Yeah, because you feel like, well, if she's still out there, she could show up in another show or something. But I don't think I want Bix when she's not in Tony Gilroy's hands. You know what I'm saying? Right. So we'll see. I am satisfied with, if that's how her character goes out, I'm satisfied with that. But yeah, like you said, it sounded, I don't know if they just made it sound open ending just for it to be more tragic, or
it's possible.
If she will be, we'll see her again in some form. So stay tuned.
So final, do you have anything else, Luke, before we look ahead to the final arc?
I was going to say I'd be a fake Alphabet Squadron fan if I didn't mention that one of our main characters is extremely inspired by Jyn Erso. Had a relationship with her. And so I just was thinking about like characters that show up after the original trilogy, like the year after Return of the Jedi. There are people who are heroes of the fledgling New Republic who absolutely recall like their hero is Jyn Erso and that Rogue One's crew. Yeah, I'm
sure Cassian's gonna be like that. And I love how so many people now have told Cassian, Melshi told Cassian this, Willman told Cassian, like, tell people what's happened here. People need to know about what's happened here. And he's again picking up those pieces. So last arc coming up. We just discussed the possible epilogue. We still got to get the scene where Krennic is looking at the construction of the Death Star. They confirmed, like it was confirmed, Andy Serkis, Kino Loy, like it has to happen in the next arc, where it was just completely made up. And I will be so frustrated and beyond upset if we don't get Andy Serkis here. But that has to happen. Luthen's blaze of glory going out. So all of these things have to happen. I'll give you my quick prediction of everything, and then we'll go from there. But I think eventually ISB agent is going to get wind of the Death Star, his ISB plant, Lonnie, going to get wind of the Death Star. He's going to get axed, telling Luthen they're going to find him out. Luthen's going to get wind of this, and Luthen's going to, I think Clea's going to get out of this alive, and Luthen's going to cause a big enough distraction where they're able to get word of this to Cassian to meet this certain informant, like Kafrene or wherever he is, where he gets the information about the planet killer. What?
Tivik, who's on the Ring of Kafrene.
Tivik, yes. So, and I think that's how the information's going to get relayed, is that it's going to keep going, down the line of like, this is what the Empire is building, so on and so forth. The only thing that makes me wonder, did Galen Erso get pushed to talk to Bodhi or, Bodhi by himself? Or were there voices possibly in his ear that, could have convinced him to talk about the plans? But, they're building this weapon, and I think Luthen's going to be the one that gives him that first bit of information of who's behind it, like in Galen. They need to go find Jyn because that's his daughter, and they're building this planet killer weapon from Krennic, and Luthen's going to be the one that kind of starts the whole path of Rogue One, happening, of going to get Jyn. And like, that's going to be his final act, is kind of getting the news of the Death Star to the rebellion just in time for all the events of Rogue One to take place. That'd be my prediction. And I'm still holding out hope for a Krennic Kino Loy conversation between the two of them. That's still on my number one bucket list. I hope it happens. And I hope that one of Luthen and Clea makes it out. I think Luthen obviously is going to die, but I hope Clea somehow, makes it out of this alive. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're all going to bite the dust, but that's what I would hope for. And then we get like a K2 and Cassian adventure navigating all of this, like on Coruscant, and getting that information out, and then meeting someone somewhere. That's what I really hope happens.
I'm seeing Director Krennic asking this random citizen, do you know how many beams come together to form that one singular beam that can destroy a planet? Do you know how many beams it would take? And the citizen turns around and it's Kino Loy and he goes, never more than 12.
I hate you so much.
Roll credits.
Never more.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, Tom, where do you think this is all headed?
Well, I
Well, we know where it's all headed, but
out of
how's it
some
going to happen?
out of some of stroke of luck, as Cassian would call it, I will be watching episode 10 with Tony Gilroy because I got tickets to Evening with Tony Gilroy with Stephen Colbert, and they're going to do a Q&A in Manhattan, and they're going to screen episode 10. So, and then I'm going to have to run home and watch 11 and 12. But I just found out yesterday because I tried to get tickets and it's sold out. It's at a museum in Manhattan. So I will definitely give you guys the lowdown. And
Dude,
I don't
that's
know if the audience.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm
Oh
so
my
excited.
gosh.
Yeah. So I just found out last night because they had tickets for the actual event, but then they had an overflow room that you could go to too. I got tickets to that, and then they said, "Oh, well, tickets are available." Became available for the main room, so I'm like, "Yes."
Yes.
So I'm really excited. I hope they do a Q&A with the audience. So if that happens, and you guys could send me some questions, and I'll try to ask them.
Oh my gosh,
But-
I'm excited for you. That's
Oh,
amazing.
so
thanks.
much fun.
Yeah,
It's so
I
much
am
fun.
like I'm like over the moon. I can't wait.
When is that?
It's Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesday.
Okay.
So 7:30 p.m. Eastern.
That's awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm jealous. That's going to be such
I
a great
wish,
time.
it was so hard. I tried to get tickets. They sold out immediately because I don't think it's a big space where they're having it. But yeah, so it was fortunate. I tried to get another ticket. No dice with that. But
I
I've had
wonder,
you guys
this
talk over
is
it.
a comment by Oscar Ticolote. He says Luthen's going to be betrayed. Do you think Luthen will be betrayed, or do you think, they've built up all of these webs? Like, do you think it finally, the tower, the house of cards finally comes crumbling down, so to speak? Because Cassian says, like, they're going to find you. Like, eventually they're going to find you. And Luthen's like, they'll hang us both, won't they? So I don't think he's going to be betrayed as much as finally there will be too many little clinks, cracks in the armor, and the sword of the Empire is finally going to pierce through it and find them out. But do you guys think a betrayal is at hand, or could it just be classic? He
I don't
gonna
think
get caught.
betrayal is going to happen. I don't see that. I haven't seen that been seeded yet. So I don't expect that. If that did happen, I think that'd be crazy. Hopefully, I'm sure they would do it in a tactful way, but I just think that Luthen's going to have one too many webs that gets out of hand. He already used Cassian Andor for Aldani and was worried because there's someone out there who knows who I am. I think something's going to get away from him. Just information wise, is going to get back to the ISB. Just flow of information, the grapevine. I don't think it's going to be a betrayal intentionally.
I was always picturing his death being something that alludes back to his monologue from season 1. Like maybe it's that sunrise, sunrise I'll never get to see, or some. I don't know. This might be fanboy.
Burn my life.
But like, yeah, I hope they do it. Well, like I feel like it's in good hands, but I hope they do it in a very poetic way. Like we've all kind of known that this is coming, so I'm curious to see. I mean, but who knows? I thought Bix was going to be a goner too, so I don't know what they have up their sleeve. Since he's not integrating with the Yavin group, I don't know what that's going to mean for him. But I see him, like Luke said, having maybe too many things go. Now that Cassian's going to be focusing, I guess, with the Yavin team, he's losing one of his top people. So I don't know how what the fallout of that is going to be for him.
This is awesome. Oscar says he's got tickets on the 30th for a screening of the finale
Oh,
with
nice.
Roy, Luna, and
wow.
Adria Arjona will be there too. She might be she might be like the most beautiful like star in all of Hollywood. Like I'm serious. She might be. That's gonna be
great,
that's gonna be a really great event. So I have two quick things before we close it out for the night that are Star Wars related, but I did not want to bring up in the middle of our Andor talk because it is completely off the rails. Number one is we have been reading through the Hobbit, and Oscar, I wish I could get to LA on the I really wish I could.
In a minute.
It's across the country. I could not make it, but I really wish I could. Number one, we've been reading through the Hobbit in graphic novel with my students as the year's closing down with some of my classes, and they've read a couple days ago. We got through the riddles scene with Gollum, and I'm like, these students, none of them have ever watched Lord of the Rings or the Hobbits. Like they need to have a jarring Gollum experience, and so I just played the clip of the riddle scene from the Hobbit movie, and say what you want about the Hobbit movies, but Andy Serkis's Gollum is always a good time.
Yep.
Watching these kids' faces as they're like, what is that? And like having no context to anything except for like this little part they read from a graphic novel of The Hobbit with Gollum. It was just hilarious. They're laughing, but also terrified because it is funny. Like there's one where, Bilbo gets like, the riddle that he didn't think he was going to, and he's like doing his noise and it just collapses over really slowly, all dramatically. It's pretty funny, and they're like, Mr. Bradshaw, like, I am terrified. Like that is the scariest thing I've ever seen. And then some kids were like, this is the greatest thing I've ever. I'm like, so that's Andy Serkis, and they were all like, who's the voice actor for this person? Like how did they do that? And so I was telling them who Andy Serkis. They're all searching up Andy Serkis then, and I told a few of them. And I was like, we're not going to watch this because I could get in trouble for this, but there is a fantastic video you should watch of Andy Serkis on The Tonight Show reading Donald Trump tweets in Gollum's voice, and it is hilarious. And some of them were like, oh, we're going to watch that as soon as we get out of here, Mr. Rich. So that was funny. It was like, that's one of those, totally play it, but yeah, I might get in trouble for that one. It's not worth it. So that was funny. And then the second thing, Luke, you mentioned the bellhop with the like thermal imploder. So, and he like launches it, and you were like, I thought it was gonna go outside. I thought it was gonna do this. So I had a recent experience myself with a thermal imploder on Battlefront. And Battlefront on the 2015 Battlefront, they have the 6 planets you can play on with the different survival modes and like the different waves of troopers that come in. And me and my friends, we've mastered all of the waves, so we decided there's only one thing left for us to do, is to turn off like aim assist, turn off the map that shows us where they're coming from, turn off the everything, so we have no idea how many troopers there are, where they're coming from, what weapons we have access to, what specials we have. And so whenever the Akbar drops one of the pods and we go get the power-ups, we don't know what the power-up is. And so I had this like shield go around me, and most of the power-ups you click it and it's like, if the rocket comes in, you'll have it, but you can put it away before you launch it. Or if it's like an orbital strike, you have to aim before you shoot. The only one that really you waste out of all of them is the thermal detonator, like the thermal imploder, because you press R1L1, it just launches. And so I did the shield, and I was in my mind, I'm getting swarmed. There's like shadow troopers, there's things everywhere. And I like freaked out, and I'm like, I have this power up, I need to see what it is. So I just press R1L1, and it's just a thermal imploder, and I launch it inside the shield, and it does not go outside the shield. I blow myself to hell, like right there. It's like launch it, and it bounces back at me, and it was just this moment of like, oh dear, like it just boom.
You finally saw the light of gratitude.
And so you mentioning like he threw it, and I didn't know what was gonna happen. That was me. I didn't know what was gonna happen. I killed myself, and then we found out we were on wave 15 of 15, and it was like so tragic. But it's okay.
That's a Cassian Andor moment.
My luck, I'd overplayed my hand. Oh my goodness. But it was so funny. I was like, no! Like the one thing it couldn't be.
Isn't that how you take out a droideka?
I mean,
Supposed to
yes,
roll
but
the-
typically they try to roll it. Really,
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, "Whoa!" Like a
Another
full-blown-
Saw Gerrera
The
reference.
Sagura moment.
Oh, I needed to inhale some Rhydonium after that. I was pretty upset, but because I was in the moment, I needed to remember that I'm right here and I'm ready to fight.
You're
like,
here.
in the
You're right
trenches.
here.
Anyway, I'll be in the trenches tomorrow. It's 8th grade Gradventure Day, which means that we'll be taking the 8th graders to Universal
Oh wow!
at 3:00 tomorrow till midnight. So
Wow.
be in the trenches tomorrow. I almost decided to get sick and not go because the Thunder play game 3 tomorrow at 10 o'clock, probably
The
closer to
Pacers
10:30,
play.
and I'm gonna miss the game because I'll be there. But I decided that you know what I'll be there in support of my 8th graders, and I need to do that because I don't know. I'm talking too much, but there's a unique situation. I like talking about my kids, and I don't care that we're going. This is important things for the universe to know. So I'm in a unique situation where I teach every 8th grader in our school because we have a very small 8th grade class because we're a brand new middle school. So we have, 300 plus, 400 plus 6th graders, like 400, 300 plus 7th graders. But 8th graders, we only have like 160 because the 8th graders are allowed to stay at whatever school they want. So a lot of them just stay where they are. And then, we get, the rest of them that want to come to our school or even encouraged to come or want a fresh start. And so it's unique because being an 8th grade teacher, I have never taught every single kid in a class before. So like I'm the one they go to, like the admins, like we need this 8th grade student. Like, what can you tell us? Because I'm the only one that teaches all of them because the math teachers, there's different levels. So it's unique. So I kind of wanted to go to because I have really special, like it's been a very difficult year in some ways, but also like one of the most rewarding having like an entire class. And like we had our 8th grade, athletic banquet the other night, and there's a couple 8th graders, that one in particular that I coached in basketball, that's like I think in terms of like impacted me as an educator. And like there's always those students are the ones that they'll stay with you for a long time. And like there's been a few of those this year, but that one in particular. And so I was like, I'll do the 8th grade thing. Now I told Tom about this. The 8th grade dance that I agreed to like league coordinate in a couple weeks. That one wasn't necessarily, all smiles, but it's okay. It's okay. We can go ahead and get out of here. But Luke, Tom, thanks for joining us. Star Wars Newsnet Live every Thursday night, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Exciting news. Tom and I are going to be interviewing James Caan here in a couple weeks. If you don't know who that is, just think about the person who wrote Return of the Jedi novelization. He's been a big part in Hollywood. He has a deep, rich history with Star Wars, and we're going to be interviewing him, talking about his upcoming memoir, his Jedi memoir that comes out very soon. So Tom and I are in the middle of reading that to have this interview. So we're really, really excited for that coming up. That interview is going to be on the 19th. We'll probably post it shortly after that week. So be on the lookout for that. Luke and I will be back with Star Wars Timeline Show very soon. We got to talk about a big episode, which is The Fallen Star. So also I'll be putting out, I forgot to put this out on Spotify and Apple, but I'll be putting out Tom and I's review of Tales of the Underworld, which came out a couple weeks ago, but you can watch it on YouTube until then. But we're going to put that out on Apple and Spotify here soon. Anything else before we get out of here? Any final words of wisdom for the world?
We're here and we're ready to fight. Looking forward to the finale.
So good. So good. For Light and Life, everyone, remember, more so than ever, we are all the Republic.